Well, hello, NFT.NYC community, and welcome to Times Square. Right behind me is the Marriott Marquis, one of the 7 buildings that we've rented for this big event that is coming up. I'm very happy to have Swan sit with me. Swan, Forbes called you the Queen of Clubhouse, and I think that was an introduction and a spark that got you involved in NFTs. I'd love for you to tell us kind of the beginning of things and give us a little background and how you got so involved in this amazing industry.
I spent most of my life in corporate America. I was the head of digital marketing for Nike, Revlon, Estee Lauder. I left corporate a few years ago in the pandemic. And like most people, I was searching for connection and fell in this little app called Clubhouse. I realized that it was a way to reconnect with old friends, meet new ones, but to help people. So I started mentoring and had mentored at scale. So a year later at 3 million followers, I realized there was something there to that. So I fully left corporate. I still sat on public boards, but I now had an audience that I could help. And because, as you remember, NFTs had a moment of popularization on Clubhouse, I fell into that too. And so much of NFTs right now today is marketing, community, and strategy, and that's what I do. So I fell into NFTs as well. So I've had an amazing time being both on the front and back end of certain projects. Front end, sometimes hosting because I have an audience and I help translate and amplify different projects and platforms and what they're doing, but sometimes on the back end with strategy. So I've worked with Adidas and Bored Apes, Adidas and Prada, Cool Cats, Boss Beauties, founding member of BFF. So really just excited to be an educator and a steward in this community and help propel us forward.
I'm coming off and on mute, everybody, just so you know. When there's a little pause, it's because I don't want it to be so noisy when Swan is speaking. Swan, can you talk a bit about marketing, community, and strategy? Of those 3, is one more important than another? Is one have the least amount of importance when it comes to what you've seen in this space of NFT projects?
That is such a good question. And I wish I could tell you focus on one, but all 3 and actually 10 things are important. Because one of the things I'm trying to change is help these projects in Web3 grow up to be companies. So I don't even want to call them projects. I think that belittles them. Company. When you run all those facets, when you've taken millions of dollars in revenue in, when you have customers who are also your shareholders, you're a company. Let's not belittle these projects that are working so hard. So when you run a company, guess what? Strategy, marketing, and community, and by the way, finance and HR and product and dev are all equally important. Now, they're important at different times, but I think in a market where, to be honest, as much as we love our JPEGs, there's no underlying asset value to them, right? If we have a share of Apple stock and they go out of business, we can liquidate inventory, we can license the IP, we can sublease the buildings. But with these JPEGs, there's actually no intrinsic financial value aside from what we ascribe to it. By the way, it's no different than a piece of art or a baseball card, right? Baseball card's a cardboard with ink on it. So when you realize that the value is based on what we value it at, now community becomes really important because those are the price setters in the market. So the way I've worked with Nike and Revlon and thinking about building community, it's the intersection of 2 things. Commonality of purpose meets frequency of touch. You have to believe in the same thing to feel a part of the tribe, but you have to interact often enough to feel active and included. So giving you an example, Women's March, really deep commonality of purpose, a bunch of marches, but in a very short time. I would argue that was a movement in time, but that was not a community, not today. Instagram, frequency of touch is high. We're on it 20 times a day, but there's lots of sub-communities like food and travel. Instagram is a platform, not a community. You don't go to Instagram's Instagram to see what Instagram is doing that day. You don't care. So that's a platform. So if you're trying to build a community, whether you're a platform or a marketplace or a project, you've got to create enough values that you align on so that your community feels aligned to you and wants to support it. But you've got to create avenues for people to participate. And the layer of Web3 that's even more different than some of these brands that have won is it's not a one-way participation where you kind of broadcast and see if they like it. It's a 2-way participation where your mods and your community holders are also participating. They're helping describe your future and prescribe it with you. That's the magic of it. So if there's one tool I can give people right now where people are hurting and it's a bear market and people are scared, of course, strategy and product are important, but you may not even have the money to do that right now. Community is the one thing that holds people together because when you win, it's easy to be a community. It's like everyone's screaming around a craps table because no one crapped out. But when you're losing together, The communities that stay together and support each other are the ones that will weather the storm.
In many ways, you built this massive community on Clubhouse, right? Over 3 million people joined your personal community and then jumped into different groups. And so there's a lot of elements to community building. And so I was wondering if you could give us a little more insight in terms of what's the point of a figurehead, a person, right, that draws people together? What is the state of community members that are leading and moderating, that are on staff and paid, compared to those that volunteer, compared to, like, can you just walk through the different elements and the importance of these different roles, and how somebody can either make some adjustments to foster greater community, or be mindful of your advice as they get ready to start their company, their project, right? Launch whatever it is that they're doing. And think, okay, this is kind of what Swan thinks I should do around community for an NFT approach.
Really, really concrete question. The main difference between a figurehead, if to use your language, is that you're not telling people what to believe, you're representing their beliefs. Right? Of course, it's a two-way dialogue, and founders have to have vision. The vision is for the business. The vision is not telling the community how to act, live, and breathe. So if you realize that your responsibility, I always say leadership is a responsibility, not a reward. And that's corporate America. I would actually argue that's the same with the Web3 community. You do not get to a leadership position and say, I'm great, I've made it, I'm the sole dictator. You represent the community. So for example, I'm at like 3.7 million followers now, but the trajectory was really weird. So I joined Clubhouse in May 2020, and for the next 7 months, I grew to 100,000. I was like, wow, there's something here. I was just organically helping people, right? Whether onboarding to Clubhouse or giving business advice. Then from the next 5 months, December to May, I did a weekly show. It was an office hours AMA. And in those 5 months, I went from 100,000 to 3 million. So it hockey sticked because I found a formula that worked. And you know what worked? It wasn't broadcasting what my beliefs were. My show was an AMA. So every week, people would come up onto the stage and ask me questions, and I would be super candid. I'd talk about racism and sexism in the workplace. I talked about freezing my eggs, all these topics that were taboo that I couldn't talk about in the corporate world. I wouldn't have had a show without that audience. I don't even call them followers or fans. I call them community because they were my content. And without them, I wouldn't have had the show. I wouldn't have had the growth. So if you put the audience and community first as those you serve versus those you direct, I think you're going to go a lot longer. You're going to have people who actually feel invested into that community and want to contribute to it. If you're just broadcasting the day you say something they don't like, they're gone, versus a collaborative conversation where maybe you can course correct or co-create together.
I got on Clubhouse in 2020 as well, a little bit later than you, but I loved being in your rooms. You were such a elegant and gracious, yet powerful and authoritative leader. And the way that you led was really fascinating. I think it's why you did so well in that environment, and the reason why people honor you the way that they do. I want to ask this about Clubhouse. If Clubhouse would have dove into NFTs and created an NFT engagement with their community leaders, what ideas might you have given that team and say, hey, consider this, consider that? I know we can't go back in time, but Twitter Spaces is popping. I'm gonna go on mute. You please speak. It's loud here.
Yeah, no, I love the New York Siren. I lived there for 13 years, so it's very familiar to me. In some ways, I think Clubhouse actually still has quite a big NFT audience. It's just a very different audience than Spaces. I think if Clubhouse had leaned in and built token gated rooms for communities to interact, honestly, it's just much friendlier of experience than Discord. I think if they'd been able to token gate certain rooms to certain members and embedded some of the verification that Discord has, I think they would have won that little slice of it. But that being said, actually, it's so good you asked that question because I want to bring up a point. So last November, I had the privilege of speaking at NFT.NYC. And if you went into Twitter Spaces after the event, people said it was the best event ever, met the best friends of my life, couldn't have asked for anything better. And if you went to Clubhouse, you heard I wasn't let into certain events based on how I looked. I did not feel like it was an equitable place. And guess what? I think both of those can be true, just like in everyday life. And so what I would ask our participants this year, and especially our leaders, is to be mindful. When you have that many people descending into a city, it's so hard to keep track of everyone and make sure everyone's taken care of. But I think it's illustration of the fact that Twitter Spaces has evolved to be a lot of the crypto forward influencers and builders. And Clubhouse is people of color and newbies coming in. And we need both, right? We've got this machine moving forward. And while one platform has the front end and the other platform has the trailing back end, we need that trailing back end, because otherwise, if we don't have more people adopting this technology, we still have to convert back to fiat. We're going to implode. We're just a security. So I think both things can be true. And I think, yes, if either Twitter or Clubhouse had put together features that were more blockchain friendly, they would both be in a better place. I think now we have two audiences that are both equally important, and I actually spend time still on both. But I think when we converge into a physical event, we can't see people as easily. We don't even know who's a tourist in Times Square versus who's an NFT.NYC attendee, aside from maybe a project hoodie that we see. So be mindful. And if you see people confused or lost or having trouble get in, reach out. Because guess what? That's what we would have done in a social audio space, because it's so much easier. It's safer. It's less risky to be, to feel like you won't be rejected by someone. Well, in the physical world, it just takes that friendly hand or that friendly smile. There's thousands of our friends all converging in a city. What an incredible opportunity. Reach out and make sure that everyone feels included, because it's so easy to get lost in who's on the list. Is it at capacity? And that's not the intention of this event.
NFT.NYC is really a great experiment, right? It would start off with a couple hundred of us 4 years ago, and it's grown into, we sold 15,000 tickets for next week. In addition, there's over 300 events with probably another 10 to 20,000 people coming to town that aren't even coming to the event. So in many ways, it's a decentralized super event. So we take your advice that you just gave very seriously. We're very thoughtful of being inclusive and trying to have as diverse of a stage, especially, right? For almost 4,000 people want to speak. We picked 1,500, and several hundred have never spoke at any event. They aren't some celebrity or big shot. We're trying to make space for diversity of different people in this industry and the projects and companies that they've launched. I wanted to ask if you could speak directly to the 300 satellite events that are happening and how you might encourage them to adopt what you just said about inclusivity, in that some of them haven't made final decisions. Are they going to have it be a closed door, or is it going to be open? So can you speak to that a bit for these several hundred other events that are happening in collaboration with the main show?
It's important to reward your project holders first. I have to admit that, right? Those are your customers. Those are also your investors, all in the same person. And by the way, they're a loud, angry mob, right? So if you are a project or even a marketplace, I think you should reward your VIPs, because Web3 is about distributed ownership, access, and relationships. So you should actually reward the people, the creators and the community supporters and buyers first. Beyond that, though, the issue of capacity is a problem, right? We've been studying traffic flow patterns for how many decades, or if not centuries, and we still can't figure out how to solve traffic. So we're not gonna be able to solve how to load balance the amount of people coming to New York for these events. What I would say, though, is yes, for the projects that are holding the events at the door, just be thoughtful about how you treat people, because I'm never going to fault them for hitting capacity, but how you even message why someone comes in is really important, right? So if you pull someone who looks like they're a certain type who should come in out of the line, it might be okay to say, thank you guys so much for patiently waiting. We're so excited to host you. This is one of our core moderators in the community. Of course, we want to reward them for their work. I hope you guys understand. Tiny bit of that context could go a long way in thinking, did I not get selected because of how I look or how I dress? And I'm sure some of it was that. I don't think most of Web3 is that bad intentioned people. We as a whole are more inclusive than any other sector or time in history I've ever seen. Beyond that, though, for every person attending, I said this on G Money's podcast. He asked me, how do we diversify? I was like, I don't think most of us are against diversification. We're just creatures of habit. When we learn something cool, we tell the people around us. So when I challenge people to diversify, I say, if you learn something cool, sure, go tell your friends. That's that alpha, that insider trading, right? I mean, that's natural. But you've got to also go tell 5 people, and none of them can look, act, or sound like you. So what I would say to everyone here is, if you find out about a cool event, or if you're in line, find people who don't act, look, or sound like you, because that's the only way diversification comes. You can't sit there and ask about their socioeconomic status. How much do you make? Where do you live? What do you do for work? You can't ask all that. That's just rude. right? But you can, at a first glance, see like this person actually looks and sounds and acts differently than me. I could learn something from them. And oh my God, how cool would it be to mix these types of experiences? And random acts of kindness go a long way. Like I was just, so part of the stuff I do, I still speak in the Web2 world. Companies like Akamai and telecom companies hire me to talk about digital innovation. So I was in Vegas last Friday, giving a talk at a jewelry show, and they accidentally or very kindly gave me 2 massive suites. Like, I'm here for one night, and they were both for 3 nights. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? So I walked through the registration line for check-in, and I said, who has done something nice for someone today? And a bunch of people raised their hands. Most of them looked at me like I was a crazy lady, because they're like, who's talking to us in a line at Vegas? And I said, okay, well, who's bunking up? And the guy raised his hand, and he's sleeping on the couch of his friend's suite. So the couple's in the bedroom and he's on the couch. It's like, well, here's a free suite for you. It's good for 3 nights. Go enjoy. That probably changed that guy's entire weekend, and it cost me nothing except an extra 15 minutes of time, because the manager gave me a lot of trouble about switching the room over. I'm like, listen, it's paid for. So if you're not going to let me do this, like, this is going to go to waste. So random acts of kindness, it doesn't have to be a free hotel room. I only mention that because it cost me a few minutes of my time. Think about that, because that is the ethos of Web3. It's WAGMI. Right? But it's not WAGMI if we're not actually doing it outside of our immediate circles of friends, whether it's opportunities to buy or invest or even go to a party. Be WAGMI about it. I want to be proud that we can stand for that.
Well, everybody, you can see why everybody loves Swan. It's not what you've done alone. It's also how you articulate things. You're a forerunner. You kind of show people the way with telling stories. It's really, really powerful. Before we end, I want to ask you about utility. Now, most people, when they think NFT utility, they're thinking, what access does it give me? Or does it have commercial rights to the IP? But I want to talk about driver's licenses and passports. Like, where are NFTs going to go in terms of legitimate human, utility to help us do things better? And so I think that that's something that you could probably speak into, just based on a little what you've told me earlier, and of course your background in business. So I'd love to maybe end the conversation there, as you just kind of say, hey, there's more than just PFPs, everybody. Here's kind of where we're going.
The popularization of NFTs, of course, starts with collectibles, whether it's art, whether it's PFPs, because there's financial upside and there's community, which feels really nice. But the application of NFTs is so much more broad than that. If you ask 10 people what an NFT is, they'll give you 10 different answers, and they're probably all correct. For me, it's a digital record on the blockchain that's unhackable, universally accessible, and you can embed smart contracts into. That's it. So I spend a lot of time not only advising PFP projects, even some art projects and platforms, because I think that's how we get more people interested in coming in. But the majority of my time is thinking through solving for human solutions. So birth certificates. My mom was adopted, and we don't exactly know how old she is. Tens of millions of children around the world don't have a birth certificate. So forget like the psychological weight of not knowing where you came from, how old you are, but the ability to get social services. Something like birth certificates, medical records. If you're on vacation and get in an accident, it's absurd you have to sit in the waiting room filling out 20 pages of information that you've already filled out at all the other doctor's offices while you're bleeding. So if we can figure out how to put these documents of identity on the blockchain, but then create a privacy layer, a security layer, that changes fundamentally identification. Like, even as simple as you're voted in an election. How do you know if your ballot counted? Or you were interviewing someone for a job. You're like, did they really do all this, or are they lying on their resume? You could have a POAP that's not transferable from a university or some sort of certificate. So I think there's a lot of practical applications in terms of identity and verification that immediately could be put into practice, regardless of the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Then there's a whole other sector from the brand world that I live in. So imagine for luxury goods, you could authenticate the product. So when I worked at Nike, we had a really long supply chain. Imagine if I could put a chip in the sole of a shoe that's so deep you couldn't take it out. Right? Now, the factory's in another country. Well, I know from that day what factory it was from, what artisan stitched the swoosh on it, and what even the environmental footprint was that day of the work that we did. Now we follow it through the supply chain. This chip, which is the same technology as Apple Pay on your phone, you can read every step of the stage. Every step, you know it's real and you know where it is. So if it goes on a truck, then goes on a boat, then on another truck, but it ends up in the trunk of a car in an alley where somebody's selling it. Now you know if it's real or not, but Nike also knows which truck it fell off of and who should be charged for that merchandise. Then when you go to retailers, if you walk down the street and you buy something from Foot Locker because you're in Times Square and you want to look fly for NFT.NYC, Nike has no idea who you are. They can't reward you for that purchase because Foot Locker is not sharing that data with Nike. Why would they? They would lose the customer. You would buy direct from Nike. Or even more valuable, the high heat sneaker drops. There's a sneakers app that Nike has that every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific, you log in to buy the coolest, dopest new shoes. And there's a very limited number of them. It's like a whole like sneaker streetwear culture meme getting an L from the sneakers app because that's everybody. Very few people ever get to buy a shoe. So if you don't have the means, you probably wake up at 7 a.m. and you log on 6 devices to hammer it only to lose. If you have means, you wake up a few hours later, have a leisurely brunch, and then you go on to the resellers like GOAT or StockX. You might pay 3 or 5x for them, but you have the means, you don't have the time. Nike has no idea who those people are either. So imagine if this chip's in the shoe and they can look and say, hey, Ian's got 30 pairs of rare Jordans in his wallet. We have no idea who he is. We don't even know it's Ian, but we see a wallet with 30 pairs of rare Jordans. They could airdrop a free pair of Jordans token into your wallet and start building the relationship. And the consumers will then decide to disclose who they are to Nike. So this not only gives brands a far better view of who their customers are, who their supply chain and loyalty ecosystem are, but it gives the power to the consumer. It is our wallet. That's the best 360 view of who we are because Netflix knows what we watched. Uber knows where we went. Amazon knows what we bought. But our wallet is soon to be the best 360 view of who we support, where we go, what we do. And so it's our choice then to decide to share it with brands. It's on them to earn the ability to know who we are and what we do. And it flips the entire data model of Web2 companies selling our information, and it gives us the choice to trade it for value. This is why I'm optimistic for the future, because right now it's a really tough time for everyone. And if you're in collectibles, almost every single one is down. If you're in coins, almost everything is down. But the utility, this type of utility is why blockchain's here to stay, regardless if the bear is 3 months or 3 years. This is why blockchain is here to stay. And the sooner we start building solutions like that, I think the sooner we start adding stability to the market. And so I applaud everyone going to NFT.NYC next week, because this is a choice you're making with your time, your wallet, and your effort. And so these are the builders and the consumers of the future. Congrats to everyone who made the choice to go, to be with their friends, to decide to build. This is going to be here to stay. It's just our choice on what we choose to build now to make it sustainable and give it longevity.
Well, wow. It's so good. Such a good conversation. Everybody that's watching, thanks for your attention. This is one of those conversations you might want to rewind to the beginning, slow down to 0.8, take some notes. I think, Swan, you really shared a lot of practical advice. It was also just layered with optimism and a positive outlook. So thank you for all that you bring to the community. And I'm really excited to have you come be a part of the event again this upcoming week. I look forward to seeing you back in your old home, Times Square, New York City, Manhattan.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving your time to do this, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, everybody, I'll be back again soon with another one. Have a very happy day.